Today I'm starting a project that I have been thinking about doing for years. I bought these two panels a while back and I wanted to make them into a vintage antique style French panels for on side of the bed, something similar to this. I found a piece of plywood in the scrap pile and decided I would make a panel out of it. I'm going to make it pretty ornate and really have fun with the molds. So I put a panel put put a primer on both sides of the board, which I have found helps keep it from warping. And then I began to make the castings from IOD clay, and these are all IOD molds. And I literally am using 6 different molds by the time I am done with this project, because somehow or other I got a little carried away with the design and needed to just get a little something exact. And I was able to find everything I wanted with the IOD molds. I drew out a simple design on paper and I kind of knew exactly what I wanted to do, but as I went along, I changed it a little bit. But I did mark my centers, as you could see there, and several times I do make sure that my design is centered, and especially the first half. I'm going to do this in half. So you're going to see the first half that I put together, and then the second half you won't see all of the parts because it took too long. It took me over 2 days to get this all set and done, mostly because I had to wait for molds to dry, then wait for paint to dry, then wait for mediums to dry, and it took a long time. But this is trimmings for an IOD mold that I am using on the top and on the bottom. I am using Titebond Quick and Thick multi-purpose glue. It is what really has worked the best for gluing down castings. Sometimes I use a paintbrush to um, rub it into the casting, and sometimes I use my finger, and there's no difference other than the fact you have to clean your finger. Oops, paintbrush broke right there in the middle of a project. Happens all the time. I really do try to control how much glue I put on the castings because I do not want that glue squishing out the sides when I press it down. So if I put too much on, I take some off and put it on a different casting. Now, when I was casting the trimmings 4 piece for the top, somehow or other I made it too small, so I had to add on an extra little piece. And you'll notice later on that that is where it shrinks. It shrinks a little away. I didn't get a lot of cracking, but I did get quite a bit of shrinking. And you'll see what I do to fill in some of those holes or those cracks, but I want it nice and straight and smooth. And now it's on to glue down the rest of the castings. So I'm turning them over to get them all set for the glue on the back. Gotta get rid of some of that little bit of pieces of clay that seems to get everywhere. And it's very important to me that I get this set in the center and get it even right now. If I set it in the center and get it even right now, then I don't have to worry about it. It will work all the way down. So these castings here are off the classic elements. It's one of those molds that's been around for a while, but it is a great mold for doing this kind of work. A lot of little detail and just fancy little castings. Again, trying to make sure it's even and in the middle. And the leaf is from the Veridis mold, and it has several smaller ones that work perfectly. This wreath is from the olive crest. It's a little bit of a tricky casting to get out perfectly, like, and they came out great. Um, but there's nothing like it. It's just beautiful. It has a little bit of berries on it. It makes the perfect wreath. Along with measuring horizontal across the board, I also measured the whole length of the board before I even started planning these castings. So I know I'm using the smaller trimmings for the top there, and I'm using the larger one down at the bottom. So now I know I have half of this design all glued down. And because it's a big board, I am going to go ahead and paint this half before I go on to do the next part. So I'm just painting it with chalk paint, chalk synthesis paint, and the color I'm using is um, Isles Ave. It is kind of a little bit of an off-white, even though it looks white there. It's an off-white. I'm just going to paint that. I painted the castings while they were still wet, and I'm just going to let that whole thing dry. I'm just opening the second package of IOD clay. So this is a 2 clay package project. So let's finish the second half. So the second half of the board, the bottom part, is just a mirror image of the top, except for I have one other casting that I use. So one by one, I'm just doing the same exact castings. And you can see what you have to do is you have to bend. These all have like a curve to them. And here's the olive crest, which is the hardest one. You have to really bend that around so that you get that. Once everything was dry and ready for some paint, I realized, I'm going to show you this, I really don't like the look that it's plywood. So what I am doing, I mixed up some salt wash in with the paint that I was using, the Isles Ave, and I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of this on the surface. Not on the castings, but if a little gets on them, it's not the end of the world. But I just don't like the look of plywood. So with the salt wash mixed in with the paint, I'm just stippling it on. And what I'm actually doing also is anywhere there was a crack after it was all glued down and dried, I'm putting a little extra of the salt wash into that. And it just adds lots and lots of texture. And that's all I do is just stipple it on the whole thing. And it pretty much destroys that paintbrush because you're just twisting it and turning it and really pressing it into all of those little crevices. I think at any point I could have stopped and just put a top coat on it because it was so beautiful the way the castings look. But I had an idea that I really wanted to add some color, and I definitely wanted to do some paint blending, and I definitely wanted to have all of those castings have a little bit of a vintage brass look in the end. So I kept on working it and got rid of that um, plywood look. I think if I had known it was going to look like plywood, I would have done something different in the beginning. And now I am mixing up another color. The first layer of salt wash and paint is dry, and now I want my color. So I'm mixing up a dark, and this is also a chalk paint, mixing up a darker aqua and putting the salt wash in with it and making that my next coat to go on to the project. I mostly mix salt wash 1 to 1, but I think I got a little too much salt wash in there, so this was a little too thick. I had to add little more paint, and I was running out of paint, so it ends up being a little thicker than I would have normally used, but actually it worked out really well because it's building up that background texture, and I'm getting rid of that, plywood look that I don't love. Stipple it on all in between the castings, but I do it right up against the castings, and what happens in the end is it makes it look like the castings are kind of embedded in a plaster, which actually is a look I love. Sometimes the best mistakes make beautiful stuff. So you could see the contrast between the 2 colors. So we've begun to put some color on this project. Salt wash is actually made to build up the layers of paint with salt wash in them and then sand it back once it's all dried. But I actually did not do a lot of sanding, only a very small amount. What I did is after I got all of this darker blue on, I put a light coat of white over it. And that way it's shining through. Not really shining through, but you can see it through. It's like just like having a wash over it. The next section is not gonna be that clear. For some reason, it didn't record, but what I do is I actually put a little bit of brass, all along different parts, and then I go over it with my final coat of paint, which is a, chalk synthesis paint, and it is going to be make the whole thing kind of a greenish soft green, but it's a wash. It's only got a little bit of paint and a bunch of water, and the reason I do that is to get it down into all those crevices. And then the last thing that I did, which you just saw the brush, was I added a little bit of patina, which you can see just arbitrarily here and there, a little bit of the patina color, which is that soft, soft turquoise. And then it's the fun part. It's time to put on the brass, and what I am using, it's actually called bronze, and it is a bronze paste, antique paste from Pentart, and I have a glove on just because I do not want it all over everything. It takes a little while for it to dry, but as you can see, it really brings everything to life. Here you can see how wide that trimmings 4 is on the bottom. It really is a super wide, um, molding, a trim molding. And I just keep adding more and more, going along doing the design. You can see that this is a really good spot for you to see that tassel trim, which came off of the Victoriana, which is a brand new mold from IOD. It is really adds so much. Even though they're tiny, they add so much. So after I finish the bronze, I have a gold, and I just added a tiny little bit of gold to a couple of the castings just to make them really pop. And you could see the background is a little bit subdued now. You can't really see all that texture. Some of the places I have already put a little bit of wax on and rubbed that in just to bring out the texture in the background. But what I'm going to use to actually finish that texture is another one of the Pentart pastes, and it is a paste, and it is simply called Antique. I dip my finger into the paste and I do not press it. I just touch the top of the texture just to add a little bit of color there to really bring out all of the texture in the background and to make this look old and like an antique. And just that little tiny bit of just touching the top, just dabbing it on, makes all the difference. But I also don't want it to look spotted, so I go back and I rub some of it in, move some of it around a little bit until I like the way it looks. And then it's time to let everything dry. It's finally done, and I let it dry, and then it's time for some photo shoots. Here's a little bit of the detail, the whole board, more of the upfront detail. I love this project. It came out better than I thought it was gonna, and I can't wait to do my next two.